On a freezing winter night, a millionaire stops his car for a flat tire and stumbles upon a little girl sleeping beside a pile of trash. What happens next will shock you, break your heart, and finally warm it in the most unexpected way. Before we dive into this incredible, true-to-life story of kindness and a hidden connection, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel so you never miss more stories that will inspire and move you. Trust me, you'll want to stay until the very end of this one. The city's winter night wore its silence like a heavy cloak. A milky fog rolled along the empty streets, softening the glare of the street lamps and turning them into pale, trembling halos. It was almost midnight, and the usual evening bustle had long since died away. The occasional sound of a distant car horn was muffled, as if the mist itself had learned how to keep secrets. Armand Meyra guided his sleek black sedan down a narrow side road, cursing softly under his breath. He was not a man who enjoyed detours. The night had already been long. A charity dinner that should have been a quiet formality had turned into hours of polite conversation and subtle competition among people who measured their worth in the size of their donations. His tie felt like a noose, and his temples throbbed with the beginnings of a headache. Then it happened, a sharp jolt, a loud hiss. "Damn it," he muttered, pulling the car to the curb. He stepped out, the cold air biting instantly through his expensive wool coat. A quick look confirmed what he suspected, a punctured tire. Armand sighed. His driver had the evening off at his own insistence, because he liked the illusion of independence, and now the illusion felt like a poor bargain. He pulled out his phone to call for roadside assistance. The signal was weak. The call wouldn't go through. He looked around. The street was deserted. A dim, flickering light came from a tea stall across the road, but it was shuttered for the night. He was alone except for the fog and the hiss of cooling metal from his car, and then, from the corner of his eye, he caught a flicker of movement. Near a sagging wire fence, beside an overflowing trash heap, something shifted, a small shape, barely visible in the mist. He squinted. It was not a stray dog, though at first he thought it might be. It was a child. A girl, perhaps 6 or 7 years old, lay curled in a nest of rags and cardboard. Her tiny frame trembled as though the cold itself were trying to shake her awake. A thin, tattered blanket, if it could be called that, covered her shoulders, but it did nothing to stop the icy night. Armand froze. His first instinct was to turn away. This wasn't his concern. He was no stranger to the sight of poverty. He had grown up in the city and knew how easily people learned to look past suffering. But there was something about the child's face, half lit by the sickly yellow of a nearby street lamp, that held him. Even in sleep her brows were furrowed, as though she were dreaming of some unkind world. Her lips, pale and dry, quivered with every shallow breath. Armand felt a tightness in his chest that no business deal had ever produced. He had spent years armoring himself against sentimentality. In the high-stakes world of real estate and finance, emotion was weakness. Yet here, before a child he had never met, the armor cracked without warning. He knelt beside her. The smell of damp cardboard and rotting garbage rose sharply, but he barely noticed. Carefully, he removed his coat, a coat worth more than the child's entire lifetime of belongings, and draped it over her small body. She stirred, eyelids fluttering open. Her eyes were enormous, dark as polished stone, reflecting both fear and something more delicate, a tentative trust. "Shh," Armand said softly, surprised at the gentleness in his own voice. "You're safe. Don't be afraid." She said nothing at first, only stared. Then, in a voice barely more than a whisper, she murmured, "Uncle?" The single word pierced him more deeply than he expected. "Are you hungry?" he asked, rising to his feet. He glanced toward the closed tea stall. Perhaps there was still someone there. The stall's owner, an elderly man with a woolen cap, appeared from behind the counter when Armand called. "We're closed," he said gruffly. Armand held up a hand. "Just a cup of hot milk." "For a child." The man's eyes softened when he saw the girl. Without a word, he disappeared and returned with a steaming cup. Armand handed over more money than the man asked. The old vendor waved it away, but Armand left it on the counter anyway. He carried the cup back to the child. She sat up slowly, Armand's coat wrapped around her like a cocoon. He helped her lift the cup, steadying her small hands. She sipped cautiously at first, then with a quiet eagerness. "What's your name?" he asked. "Mira," she said, a shy lilt to the syllables. "Do you have parents nearby?" She shook her head, her gaze lowering to the rim of the cup. Armand wanted to ask more, but the questions caught in his throat. He knew there were children like Mira all over the city, orphans of circumstance, of poverty, of misfortune. But meeting one in the flesh made statistics feel like wounds. A sudden crunch of gravel broke the fragile quiet. Armand turned to see a figure emerging from the fog, a night watchman in a frayed uniform, carrying a lantern that cast a small circle of trembling light. The man stopped a few feet away and regarded Armand and the girl with a curious intensity. His eyes, though weathered by years, held a brightness that suggested recognition. "You," the watchman said, his voice low but certain. "You are Armand Meyra." Armand straightened, startled. "Do I know you?" The man smiled faintly. "Not personally. But I knew your best friend, Rahul Singh." The name struck Armand like a sudden wind. Memories surfaced, a boyhood of shared dreams, the young man who had once been closer than a brother. Rahul, whose laughter had filled their school days. Rahul, who had spoken endlessly of building a home for children who had none. Armand's throat tightened. He had not heard that name in years, not since the accident that had taken Rahul's life abruptly one rainy evening. The watchman continued. "This girl, Mira, is Rahul's daughter." Armand blinked, disbelieving. "That can't be." "Rahul had no children, at least, he never told me." The old man nodded. "She was born a few months before the accident. Her mother died soon after. I have watched over her from a distance, but I am an old man and could not give her the life she deserves. I prayed that one day you would find her. Tonight, the Lord answered." Armand's mind reeled. Rahul's daughter? He looked at Mira anew, and suddenly he could see faint echoes of Rahul in the curve of her jaw, the arch of her eyebrows. A memory came back to him. Rahul's voice years ago saying, "If something ever happens to me, promise me you'll carry the dream forward. Promise you'll build that orphanage." Armand had promised, lightly, as young men often do, and then buried the vow beneath the avalanche of adult ambition. Now the promise stared back at him in the wide, dark eyes of a child. He crouched down, taking Mira's small, chilled hands in his. "Mira," he said softly, "would you like to come with me? To a warm home? To a place where you'll be cared for?" She hesitated only a moment before nodding. The watchman's eyes glistened. "It seems Rahul's faith in you was not misplaced." Armand felt a weight lift from his shoulders and settle somewhere deeper, in his heart. The success he had spent years chasing, buildings, investments, accolades, suddenly felt paper-thin compared to the quiet gravity of this moment. He looked at the night sky, where the fog had begun to thin, revealing a scatter of cold, brilliant stars. "Rahul," he whispered under his breath, "I will keep my promise." 6. Building the dream. The weeks that followed transformed Armand's life in ways he had not foreseen. Mira came to live in his spacious but lonely apartment, filling it with the music of childish laughter and the gentle chaos of toys and crayons. Armand began the process of legally adopting her, a journey of paperwork and patient explanations. Through it all, Mira remained a quiet yet radiant presence, grateful, curious, and slowly trusting. But Armand knew his responsibility went beyond one child. Rahul's dream had been larger, a haven for many children who had no home. He threw himself into the project with a fervor he had never felt for any business venture. The same skills that had built skyscrapers now served a different purpose. He purchased land on the outskirts of the city, designed airy dormitories filled with light, and assembled a team of teachers and caretakers who believed in the same vision. Months later, the orphanage opened its doors. Children of all ages filled the grounds with life and laughter. Mira, once a silent figure by a trash heap, now ran among them, her hair catching the sunlight, her voice ringing with joy. On the day of the orphanage's inauguration, Armand stood before the gathered crowd. The watchman, his lantern, now a ceremonial symbol, sat in the front row, pride shining in his eyes. Armand spoke simply. This place is not just bricks and mortar. It is a promise, one made long ago between friends. It is proof that kindness, even when delayed, can still change the world. He looked down at Mira, who smiled up at him, the same quiet trust in her eyes that he had seen on that winter night. A hush fell over the audience as the sun broke through the morning clouds, casting a golden light over the children. For a moment the orphanage seemed to glow, not just with sunlight, but with something more enduring. Hope. And in that luminous silence, Armand understood that wealth was never about numbers or property. Real wealth was the ability to keep a promise of love and to turn a single act of compassion into a legacy of light. Reflection. The winter night that began with a flat tire ended with a lifetime of purpose. A simple gesture covering a sleeping child with a warm coat had led Armand back to a forgotten vow and forward to a future where many more children would find warmth, safety, and family. Kindness, he realized, is not just an action. It is a force that waits patiently for the right moment to reveal its power. And when it does, it can turn even a night of loneliness into the dawn of something eternal.